whether you like it or not. My guest tonight is celebrated author, bestseller in fact, professor, and renegade feminist Camille Paglia.
Listen, Laura, I just want to thank you for your very early support of my work. 5 years ago, you were one of the first people in the world to recognize my writing.
You've said that feminism, a lot of it is trying to emasculate men. What about that?
Well, I come out of an Italian culture where we have very strong women and very strong and glamorous men. I never knew any weak men in my entire tradition. And there's absolutely no comparison between the kinds of masculine charisma, let's say, of my uncles and cousins or my father and so on, and these kind of wimpy men dragging themselves around today in the white middle class, all of whom are trying to obey feminist dicta. What I'm saying is that when a man tries to obey the feminist agenda, he cuts himself down to become a son to a mother goddess. And that is not in the best interest of women. It's in women's best interest to want very virile and therefore, by definition, rather troublesome men.
And I think you said to me once before it was, you had a motto for the latter part of the 20th century, and it was?
I said to them, I want to embolden men, and I want to tell women to,
fan the flames of lust.
Yes, I want to fan the flames of lust. So I say to men, get it up, and to women, I say, deal with it. So I think we need more pornography now, not less.
More pornography? Well, why does that have to be done through pornography? Why can't that be done in person?
I think that we need better quality pornography. I think the pornography industry has certainly degenerated. It's a very little skillful work is coming out of it. That's what gives it a lot of its bad reputation. But I support Playboy and Penthouse, and have gone out of my way to publish in them and so on. I think that more white middle class women have to learn that the sexual images that men have projected are in fact based on reality. That they are not degrading. They're not degrading to women.
Gotcha. Does that mean as long as we have girls and women who are like rushing out to wet t-shirt contests and basically putting themselves in a supply and demand position, trading mostly on breasts and buttocks instead of brains, we will always have those kind of guys. How do we change that?
Well, I'm in great favor of wet t-shirt contests. I love Hooters. I support Hooters. I have a t-shirt from Hooters. I love the whole history of sexual exhibitionism going all the way back to ancient Babylon. I think it's in our genes. I think that it's natural for the sexes to want to display to each other in erotic terms.
Yeah, but is that the only thing that, I mean, an awful lot of girls are taught that's the only thing to do, and they think that is their only weapon. They haven't learned anything else.
I'm not so sure anymore that's our problem. I think it's the opposite. In the white middle class, we have girls going along who are being told, you are going to be future leaders. You must be a lawyer or a senator or a doctor or an astronaut. And I think at least 50% of the women in the Ivy League schools have no desire, in point of fact, to be there. And 50 years ago, they would just have gotten married. And this is my explanation for the epidemic of anorexia and bulimia. The whole point of the 60s was to question the Western career system and to say that we are much more than our social selves. And right now, in the Ivy League, there's only one way to be. If a girl in the Ivy League at a sophomore level were to say, I'm going to drop out, get pregnant, and live with my boyfriend in the commune, the way people in my generation did, such girls would be treated as traitors to their class, wasting their expensive education and so on. No, I think we're having the opposite problem right now, an overdevelopment of the Apollonian side of young women's selves.
You think that's just sort of the normal swing back and forth, the pendulum of history?
Yes, throughout history, that's what happens. You have an excess, which generates a reaction that goes too far and becomes excessive, and now we're moving in the opposite direction again. I'm afraid most of the country, and the world probably, is moving back toward the right.
Why?
I believe it's because modernism has failed. That is, modernism has...
What was modernism?
The 20th century. There have been a number of major revolutions of thought in the last few hundred years. The Enlightenment, for example, opposed organized religion, but put science and reason in its place. Then Romanticism also opposed organized religion, but it put poetry and art in its place. Now in the 20th century, right, you have modernism knocking everything down, all ideals, religious, patriotic,
family.
Everything, family, everything is gone. And so I, as a teacher now of almost 25 years, say that the children have nothing. The young have nothing. These are the latchkey kids of Generation X, right?
Orphans, I call them.
Yes, they're orphans. We have a whole generation of young people that lack the exuberance and the gusto that you and I have as part of our generation. We have a kind of brio that they, a kind of joie de vivre that they lack.
You once said, you have a famous statement, infamous statement possibly, that says there are no female Mozarts because there are no female Jack the Rippers.
Right. I feel that both genius and criminality of the Jack the Ripper kind are deviations off the ends of the spectrum. Women seem to chart in the great middle of the IQ continuum. And we know IQ is a very fluid concept, but I feel that that the reason there haven't been no major female artists in the visual arts in history is not simply due to women's lack of access to training. That is certainly true for some genres like sculpture, where women were not could not work as apprentices and had no access to expensive materials like bronze and so on. But let's take an example of musical composition or philosophy or mathematics. Women had access to pen and paper for hundreds of years now. An example of music, well-bred women of the middle and upper classes have had access to piano instruction. It was expected of women since the 1790s. It's now 200 years later. I speak as a professor of the history of the arts. It has to be remembered. In fact, even a composition teacher, a professional composer in my own university took me aside a number of years ago and said, why is it that my best women composing students drop out and just go off and get married, and far less talented men continue? And the reason is, I think, that women are not comfortable in an abstract world without emotion or psychology, that men, in fact, flee to computers or to math.
I disagree. I think it's something else entirely.
Yes.
I think it's that men's genitals are outside their bodies, and ours are inside our bodies. And because men's sexuality is on the outside, and we never think of ours, they have to come up with art to leave behind them, because we can come up with babies. And being much more complicated creatures, because we are, let's face it, we go through menstruation, menopause, all sorts of physical changes that men can't even imagine. I think that the big difference is that, and the greatness of men, is that they go too far. And when you say fan the flames of lust and get it up and keep it up, it's along that they go too far. That's their job. Their job is to build these bridges, to put us together. Their job is to put missiles up. We would never bother with that stuff. Our job is to make sure everybody's okay and warm and fed and clothed, and to keep men from going too far. You said something once wonderful to me. You said you understand male rapists, that women lead you on, and they have no idea what they're doing, because we've been trained to relate sexually. Sometimes I know models, that's the only way they relate and actresses, to anyone, male or female. They relate completely sexually. They'll come up, and if they like you, they'll come up, throw themselves, and wiggle all over you. And, you know, that must be rough on an awful lot of guys. What do you mean, the eyes of a male rapist?
Well, I think that it's not just trained. Certain women are trained to behave in an excessively erotic manner.
What do you feel?
I believe that women really don't know what they want. This is what I feel as someone whose dating life as a lesbian was a disaster. From I have struck out. You know, I have practically like 100% strikeout rate. As a person who's trying to date other women. So I have the same frustrations that men have with women. The way women can't make up their mind. That women aren't even aware when they're aroused. Whereas again, just what you said about the externality of male genitals, men suddenly discover that they have they have a bulge in their pants. Oh, this is surprising because I'm sitting with another man. Sort of like, but women. Women's inner life is very misty. It's very misty and cloudy. I think that women are a mystery to themselves. So I understand many men's rage toward women because it's impossible to pin women down. Women are baffling. They're goddesses. One is in love with them, but they are absolutely frustrating to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Paglia, you said that you have to understand football to understand men in the workplace. What's that mean?
I believe that American football is the center of a lot of our thinking in politics or in and the general cultural agenda. And I have learned an enormous amount about life from football. I call football my only real religion. It teaches you strategies of offense and defense. Right? It tells you how to pick yourself up after a heavy hit. It tells you how to pursue. It tells you how to strategize on the long term. You know, if you're defeated in the Super Bowl, you have to wait an entire year to get back again, and so on. I have a very long view. It could be Italian also. Okay, Italians, we invented the vendetta. Okay, and so on. So I love planning, and I love all of the techniques of subterfuge. And O.J. Simpson, for example, and the juking and the jiving style that he had running down the field even influenced certain things that I do. I love, if I were to be a football player, I would be either I would be a tight end, that is one of the ones a big guy who gets the ball over his shoulder and whap, knocks people down on the way to the goal line. Or I would be a free safety. I view myself as the free safety, actually, of academe or of the culture. And you're someone who roams the field, and you appear out of nowhere and just knock people down. You see?
Sounds good.
Oh,
Sounds like you.
It's me.
The first time we talked was maybe 5 years ago, after your first book came out. We talked a lot about sexual harassment, date rape, and women setting themselves up for it by having 10 tequilas and going to some guy's dorm room and then screaming when she got raped. And the fact that my generation, in the 50s, we all knew that men were very dangerous animals, and you just don't go near them when you've had a whole bunch to drink unless that's what you want. A lot's changed since then.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be so much a problem. And I think a lot of it had to do with you.
Oh, there's no doubt that when I came on the scene and began writing about the date rape hysteria, this would have been early 1991, I was abused from coast to coast.
Oh, yes.
I had to have security guards when I went on campus. Yeah, but I've made an enormous change. There's no doubt about it. The entire date rape, sexual harassment discourse has really quieted down and is much more open to different points of view today.
And you think that's because girls, once again, are getting protective of themselves and understanding that the male animal is a dangerous force?
Well, I think people are following my philosophy, which is that every woman should take personal responsibility for her own behavior in her own life, that is the way to full female freedom. We don't want to go backwards to a protectionist regime again, where you have to run to big daddy figures to get you out of a jam.
How do you think that WASP culture has influenced this country's consciousness or has formed it?
Well, the conflict with the old white Anglo-Saxon Protestant establishment is the story of my life. My immigrant family came over here and has been hyper-aware for as long, older than I am, of the kind of style that was enforced, style of decorum that was enforced by the WASP people who had this country to themselves for several hundreds of years. Beginning in the 1830s and 1840s, you started to get Irish coming over, and the Irish were the first ethnic group to be discriminated against. Famous signs in Boston, no Irish need apply, and so on. But now, then started coming over Eastern European and Southern European kinds of immigrants who did not speak the same language even as the Irish had, and you began to get a lot of tension between the old WASP and the new immigrants. So what we're getting from about 1870s, 80s on, my Italian forebears came over. We are highly aware of discrimination against us practiced after the World War II era. For example, when my father went to look at property that was for sale in suburban Syracuse, New York, he was told the property had been sold. In point of fact, it was not sold. He had an Italian surname, and this small exclusive town in the suburbs would not sell to any ethnic minorities. In the 1950s, there were towns in Connecticut that were still restricted. It would not let Jews buy property in that area, and so on. So there's a great tension. I myself I got my PhD from Yale University, but I'm very aware that I was probably being discriminated against more as an Italian American than I was as either a woman or as a lesbian in certain ways. Because my style is very abrasive. I'm very passionate. I'm very theatrical. I'm loud. All of this. If you do not.
But I'm all those things.
You're not an Ivy League professor. If you plan to go along the track to become an Ivy League professor, you better conform. And even the blacks who have been hired by the Ivy League have all been subordinated to this style, and it is atrocious. Okay, that WASP style is a gigantic mechanism that has never stopped grinding. Even today in the corporate world, people are still, every ethnic eventually loses his or her ethnicity if you're in the corporate world in America long enough.
Yeah, but don't you think that, I mean, like, to me, the biggest ethnic difference is money. And our class seems to be made by money now in America. The language, I mean, if someone speaks English in a certain way, that seems to be much more important in their getting a job than the color of their skin. It's the way they speak English. And you still think that the male white businessman is still ruling America?
Well, what I'm saying...
I don't, and I think they haven't for a very long time.
No, what I'm saying is that the Industrial Revolution was born in England, and that Northern European Protestant style, rather passionless and bland, is in fact the best way to get along in the office for office work. And so that's what I'm saying, that this huge mechanism of the industrial world, right, that is what's permanent about WASP style. So I'm calling for what I call creative duality. So you could be one thing at the office, but then you must recover your vitality and flamboyance, your ethnic roots in your at-home self.
Yes.
All right? Because I think that there's no way, I thought I could be an Italian all the way through academia and so on, and that's how I got fired from Bennington College, okay? Because institutions cannot tolerate, in point of fact, too much flamboyant theatricality of the kind that I was absolutely lavish with in my first job in the 1970s at Bennington.
Tune in to Lauren Hutton and singer Debbie Harry. You won't be sorry, Lauren Hutton and. I'm back with social provocateur, Camille Paglia. What do you think about affirmative action?
I think affirmative action was very noble in its original ideal, but that the way it has been practiced has been utterly corrupt, and the entire system needs a radical revamping. I think that most progressive people would agree that, that African Americans deserve some special dispensation in view of what they have suffered in history. But in point of fact, it's white middle-class women who have benefited most from affirmative action. It's the affirmative action, let's say, as practiced in the major universities at the level of faculty recruitment. In the Ivy League, from Harvard to Princeton, all the elite schools, Chicago, Berkeley, Duke, and so on, you have mediocre women, fifth-rate women, who have been leapt over far more deserving white men for positions, right? And it is women, due to affirmative action, who have destroyed the standards for scholarship in the humanities programs in America. And affirmative action, should be put out of its misery.
How do they do that? They just yank it up? And then what happens to all the people that really, really deserve it and really need it?
What affirmative action should have been about originally was making some special effort for those who are truly deprived, truly, provably, demonstrably deprived. Instead, what happened was that you had Hispanics suddenly declared a privileged class. Well, why am I not declared a privileged a minority class in virtue of being Italian American? My mother was born in Italy. Yet you have someone from a well-off, and I know of cases, outrageous cases, of people from a rich upper middle class family who have one Hispanic grandparent, all right? They would get scholarship money that should have been going to deserving, even poor whites. Yeah. It's been milked, okay, by embezzlers and extortionists.
That's why some people don't believe in our government. How would you revamp the system?
Well, I think it has to be looked at very closely. I think that affirmative action should be class-based and not racially based.
And class is economic class.
Economic deprivation, proven economic deprivation.
Yeah, that's what I think. Do you think that there's becoming a wider and wider class difference in America?
I think that it is now, that there's a expanding black middle class and Hispanic middle class and so on. I do feel that there's a serious problem having to do with inner cities versus suburbs. I think that's where you have the problem. As the manufacturing base of the American economy fell away, our manufacturing jobs have gone overseas, and as a consequence, education now, as usual, for me, is the key. We have all the power in society going to those who can manipulate the computer, who can be part of the white-collar service sector, which has expanded enormously since World War II.
What happens to people who don't?
This is the problem. I think the inner cities are falling into a very dangerous situation. I want far more attention to the condition of the inner cities.
But they build prisons instead.
Yes, I feel that we need to put the money, rather than prisons, into building up the quality of inner city education. It is scandalous. The immigrant generations in the inner cities had a wonderful standard American education, and I am the result of it. I mean, we immigrants profited from that. We had access to American society, but there is a kind of condescending paternalism coming out of the liberal elite in this country that says, oh, those poor people, they can't possibly really master the skills of basic English and the skills, basic mathematics and reading and so on. So we'll just keep on. We don't want to hold their socialization back. So we'll keep passing them from grade to grade. We wouldn't dream of flunking them.
Yeah. Now they do that all over the country now. Thanks for coming.
Well, Lauren, thank you for inviting me. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Good night, and good night, Betty Page, wherever you are.
Rejuvex from SunSource, the best-selling supplement for women during menopause and after. Rejuvex, it's natural for the changing nutritional needs of women during menopause and after.
Here's General Nutrition's natural brand Ginkgo Biloba Plus with gotu kola, ginseng, and lecithin.